Hi, Ann here from Backward Buddies, and the video we want to share with you today is about preparing for Season 4, Alaska Bound. First, we want to start off with a couple of announcements. If you notice at the intro, we are going to switch from using right buddy and left buddy to refer to ourselves in these videos and our blog posts. We're actually going to start using our first names. So I'm Ann. I'm what we used to call Right Buddy, and my husband Keith is formerly known as Left Buddy. Now, also we struggled a little bit last season keeping up with all our social media accounts, so we're going to have some changes this season. We shut down our Twitter account, so we're no longer going to be updating to that. And now that Keith is fully retired, he's in charge of making some timely posts to Instagram and Facebook. And those will be more real time compared to our blog and our videos, which can lag sometimes as much as several months behind when they actually occurred. So I hope you like the changes. Now, these items that we did to prepare to get on the road aren't in any particular order. They're not necessarily specific to heading up towards Alaska. Some of them were influenced definitely by that, but most of them could apply to wherever you're traveling. If you're only interested in a few of the items, we actually have them listed in the description below along with the timeline of where they appear in the video. So if you just want to skip ahead to a particular item, you can do that. So check out the description below. So let's begin with item number 1. So item number 1 was Espar maintenance. We probably didn't actually need to do this. I think we were looking initially at some old data which said you should do some maintenance on the Espar heater every 1,000 hours of usage, which we really probably weren't at 1,000 hours yet. We had been using it for 2 seasons, but not a whole lot during each of the seasons. But the actual model we have, they actually recommend doing maintenance every 5,000 of usage hours, which we are nowhere close to. But anyway, we bought the maintenance kit. Describe what all is going to happen here.
Okay, so we've got the Espar unit pulled out of the van and the fuel pump pulled out. Some of this stuff could probably be done in place without having to remove it all, but just for my own sanity and not working under the vehicle, I'm going to take it out and see so I can see what I'm doing. So with the fuel pump, it should just be replacing a tiny filter. These are parts that I ordered ahead of time. So this little guy, I believe, is the fuel filter that'll go inside here. And then the other main component to replace is this screen, which is the igniter screen for the Espar. So supposedly these things can get kind of charred and hard to come to temperature or glow. So that's what we're going to do. So obviously don't do this unless you have the new one that can go right back in, because this is no longer usable. There we are. Don't know if, let's see, it's yellowed some, but I'd say it's probably not in too bad a shape. There we are. I know it's got a little char to it, but there's my blood. A little char to it, but it looks pretty good. If you want to look down inside there, that looks fairly clean.
We did some of the maintenance and we probably didn't need to, but it is what it is. Item 2 was to replace our starter battery. It was getting old. I mean, it was still working fine, but we'd rather replace it now than have it go bad on us when we're out in some remote road up in northern Canada or Alaska. Now it's, kind of a weird place on the Ford Transit. It's underneath the driver's seat, which makes it, I don't know, it's a little awkward to get to, but not too bad. So we replaced that. So item 3 is we added a microwave. Now this is a 700 watt, 0.7 cubic foot microwave. We set it on this rubber mat that kind of has these holes in it, so the legs of the microwave sit down in there, so it doesn't really slide. And then Keith bolted a strap down into the shelf, and on the other side is a buckle so we can release that. And he also built this little tray on top, and it just sits on there with these nice strong magnets. So it's a nice little storage. We can throw stuff up there and make use of that space without things sliding off. And then in addition, since we had a microwave, the reason for the microwave is, yes, we can reheat food with our butane stove and our Instant Pot, but it's not as convenient as a microwave. The other thing was making popcorn that we assume we'll be doing a lot of. And yes, you can do it on a pot on the stove, and we did, but a lot of times, especially, it's usually evening you want to do that, and it's already dark outside. You don't want to get the stove out and dirty a bunch of dishes. So the microwave hopefully will fill that need for us. So along those lines, we bought this, I think it's called Salbray microwave popcorn popper. So we can just put the, let's see if I got it down here. Just kind of bulk popcorn. You just pour it in the bottom, you put the lid on, you throw it in the microwave, it pops. No oil, nothing. You can just pop popcorn, and then this is nice and easy to clean out. You just kind of wipe the little popcorn dust out of there and you're good to go. Now, we have heard that oils and seasonings will damage this popcorn popper, so we actually dump into another bowl and then add whatever seasonings or butter or whatever we want to add on there. And I like it too because I'm trying to reduce my sodium intake, so I can make popcorn with no salt whatsoever. So it's just the popcorn. I melt a tablespoon or 2 of unsalted butter and pour that in the bowl with the popcorn and just add a little bit of sugar. So I kind of have a kettle corn, no salt involved. Good stuff. Now, along those lines too, we needed dishes that we could put in that were microwave safe. We didn't want to carry a lot of heavy ceramics because they might break, and plus of the weight. So we actually bought a set of plates, and there's also matching bowls up here that are made out of wheatgrass. So it's kind of a plastic, but not made from oil products. It's made from wheatgrass, which is kind of the byproduct, and organic. So those were for the microwave, and then also along the lines of having something to heat drinks up in the microwave, we got these little, now these are ceramic, but we needed something short because this is not a very big microwave, so we had to have something short that would fit in the microwave. So those did the ticket. If you notice, we have a spare dish towel in here that we wrap around the glass plate in there. This is just an extra precaution, so when we're bouncing down the road, we want to make sure that we don't break that plate. We know a lot of people that travel with a microwave in an RV, and they have no issues, and they don't protect it at all. But we feel a little better having that. So what's nice is these plates and the popcorn popper fit nicely in there so we can store them in there as well. So item 4 is we replaced our fairing. We actually built a new one. Keith took our previous fairing, which was made by Colorado Fairing. It's a really beautiful fairing, but we had a couple cracks in it develop over last season. So we actually used their fairing to trace out a new one out of a slightly thicker ABS plastic and put that on there. It doesn't look as nice as the Colorado fairing, but it should do the job. And we found out after we did that Colorado fairing would have replaced it for free. And they have also switched to a thicker plastic, so it should be more durable if you happen to purchase one from them. So item 5, we improved our leveling block situation. We have these beach lane leveling blocks, and so all we did was found some stuff sacks that we could store them in. So this way, I mean, if these are dirty, muddy, wet, whatever, we now have them in a bag. So when we throw them in the van, we're not tracking all that dirt and mud and moisture into the van. In addition, last year we also carried a couple 2x6s. Now these were for additional leveling if we needed a little more height or for helping us get unstuck out of mud. Now we carried 2 of them last year. We actually added 4 more, so we have 6 of these altogether that we're traveling with for season 4. So item 6 is we added another tool bag to our kit. This one contains metric tools. Most of the tools needed to work on the Ford Transit require metric. And so even if we don't know how to fix an issue, if we break down on the road, maybe someone coming by does, but we just want to make sure we have the tools that we're able to solve our problems on the road. Item 7 is we redid the DC wiring for our isotherm refrigerator. Now during the season last year, we had switched it over from AC to DC, but we had spliced in a wire, and so when we got home we reran that with a single wire. We actually, you can't see it, but it's back in there along the side of the shelving. There is a plug so we can easily unplug the fridge and pull it out in the off season. So that's what we did over the winter. So item 8 is we added this lip on the back of our kitchen pod. Last year during the season we actually lost the cheese slicer back behind the kitchen pod, and it fell way down in there and we had trouble getting it out. And the only way to get it out was actually to unload everything here and pull the kitchen pod out to get to it. So in the middle of the season, we actually just bought another cheese slicer and just left that one back there till we got home in the winter and pulled everything out and could get to it. So now we just added a little strip of aluminum on the back here so things don't easily slide off the back of the cabinet and get lost behind there. So item 9 is we finally replaced the flooring in here that we initially put in several seasons ago. We intended to replace it at the beginning of season 3, but we had bought too thick of a flooring to go in there, and we couldn't get the drawer on the kitchen pod to open. So we scrapped that and waited till coming into season 4 here, and we actually found an appropriate thickness of flooring to put in here, and it's got a nice little fake wood grain look to it. So hopefully that will last longer than the original one we had put in there. So we'll see how that goes and let you know. So item 10 is we improved on the design of the rear screen that we had built the previous season. We added this little Velcro tab here. And the reason for that is when we close the doors, we actually have to pull down the corners of the screen so they don't get caught in the latch up there. However, without this tab here, when we do that, then this wouldn't really stay and it would come and flap all around. So it was more of a pain when we got to a location and we wanted to put the screen up to get it all back together and and up there. So we're hoping this little Velcro tab will keep most of the screen in place except for these little corners, and we just need to fold those back up when we want to leave the van open and get airflow going through there without the bugs. So item 11 is we patched the screens. They didn't quite hold up as well as we were hoping. I don't know if you can see that, but we developed little small holes and tears, so we just bought a little screen repair kit and repaired the holes for the screen. So hopefully that'll keep out all of those Alaska bugs we keep hearing about. Item 12 is we replaced the seat that we use on this wooden bench seat here, and this is kind of our second seat. So one of us usually sits in the passenger seat of the van and the other person sits here. We were using a Brontide wide stadium chair, but we used it for 2 seasons, and the cushioning of it was getting rather compressed and it wasn't as comfortable as it originally was. So we thought we'd try out something different. This is called Sport-A-Seat. It's actually popular in the sailing community, but it seems to really have a nice thick padding. If you notice, it is not secured down to the bench like we did the Braun Stadium seat or Brontide. But we're actually thinking that'll work out better because it'll make it easier to get to the things in the back here and just pulling that in and out. This reclines just like the Braun chair did, so it can go out flat or any position you want in between. So we'll let you know how that works out. I don't know if you can see this real well, but how our freshwater tank hooks up to our water pump is there's a plastic hose that comes into this bulkhead adapter, and we were struggling. We've used this now for 3 seasons, and it was starting to get a little difficult to pull that tube in and out and get that set in there right when you're changing out the freshwater tanks. So we just bought some new parts and replaced them, and that seems to be working well again. And hopefully that'll last the season. Item 14 is that we added more DC ports. So that's what these are here. You know, so we've got quite a few USB devices plugged in there. We initially were using, there was a AC power strip down here that would take USB, and then we also have a AC power strip underneath the kitchen pod that takes USB devices, but that's inefficient to go from converting to AC back to DC instead of just running straight DC off of our batteries, especially now that we have the fridge running off of DC. We can actually turn the inverter off most of the time and don't need to have that on. So if we can hook most of our USB devices directly into DC, then we can leave that inverter off more of the time. And that has a slight draw just in and of itself, in addition to the power loss you get by converting the power back and forth between AC and DC. Item 15 is we installed a keyless entry keypad on the van. We initially bought the Ford part off of eBay, and we were struggling getting it programmed ourselves. We struggled getting the Ford Transit to go into what's program mode, so you can actually program the keypad and all your fobs together. And so we, even after perusing a lot of the Ford forums, we ended up taking to the Ford dealer and they programmed it for us. They didn't actually tell us what our issue was and why we couldn't do it. But we also found out that we had the wrong version of the keypad. We had a newer model, and because this is a 2018 Ford Transit, we needed a different keypad than what we had bought, so we had to buy another one from them. So, but that keypad should have nothing to do with being able to put the Ford Transit into program mode. So we still don't know what our issue was and why we couldn't do that. So if you're trying to do that yourselves, be aware that there are people that struggle getting it into program mode and getting that to work. And if you can figure that out and let us know, that would be great. Or let everybody else know, because it should be a simple thing to do instead of having to pay the dealer to do it. In addition, you'll notice that we put this keypad on the passenger door instead of the driver door like most people do. And that's because we're using this as an RV. So when we're at a campsite, we're usually going in and out of the sliding door when we're parked and using it as a camper. So we thought it made more sense to put it on this side instead of having to go around to the driver's side all the time. Now this is another one of those things to be a little more self-reliant. So the van is our shelter, so if it happens that something happened to our keys, we lost them or whatever, that we still have our shelter. We may not be able to drive the van away without the keys, but at least we'll be able to get into the van and hopefully resolve what other issue it is. But we'll have shelter. Item 16 is we bought another collapsible water container. I mean, if you notice from before, we generally travel with 2 freshwater jerry cans and 2 gray water jerry cans, which hold about 6 gallons. Well, I think they're actually like 5.5. And typically we go through one of those a day. I mean, if we're conserving water, we can usually stretch that out longer. But we usually account for we're going to go through one of those a day. So if we're going to know we're going to be coming up to a location where we're going to have to extend that longer, last season we were carrying one of these collapsible water containers, so we would fill this up for extra fresh water. However, we normally go through just as much gray water as we do fresh water, so we bought a second one of these to hold our gray water, so we can extend the length of time we can go without a water source and dump station one day longer than what we can without these. In addition, just as a backup, we also carry a Sawyer mini squeeze. I think it's a micro squeeze filter, water filter. So if there is a natural freshwater source around, we can filter that water and use that if we really need water. Number 17 is we purchased some rubber tire chocks. These are not the cheap light plastic ones. These are the heavy solid rubber ones. These are for if we happen to be parked on a slope and we really want to make sure that van's not going to roll away, we'd put these under the tires to keep it from rolling. Item 18 is a good tire patch kit. This goes along with trying to be self-reliant. If we're get a nail or something or rock and a puncture in the tire, we can actually plug the tire. This tire plug kit is from Boulder Tools. But this is, we may be on roads where roadside assistance may not get to you very quickly, so we want to be able to patch a punctured tire ourselves and at least get limped into town to get the tire replaced. So again, another self-reliant just in case to take along. So the tire patch kit kind of goes hand in hand with the air compressor that we always carried before. So yeah, once you repair the tire, you need to be able to put air back into it. So the air compressor we have hooks up to the starter battery and will pump the tire back up. Item 19 is purchase a Luci light. If you're not familiar with Luci lights, they're solar powered lights. They're inflatable, so this is while it's inflated, so you can deflate it and it stores pretty flat and doesn't take up a whole lot of space. And then when you need a light, that's a low setting. Let's see if I can. think that's the brightest setting there. It's kind of hard to tell in the daylight, but it's an LED light that's powered by a little solar panel, so a nice little backup light. Item 20 is to bring along a third DC fan. Now, we normally travel with a DC fan up here on both sides of the bed, at the foot of the bed, and this helps with airflow getting up here above the bed. However, it doesn't do much for the person sitting under the bed to get airflow under there. And we tried sometimes to detach one of these and bring it down so we could blow underneath the bed. But we at one time originally had these fans mounted up there, and we liked this newer mount system better, so we swapped them out. So we had this just sitting at home, so I thought, why don't we just bring it along so we can set it on the kitchen pod and blow it underneath the bed and get airflow down under there. So item 21 is we replaced our single burner butane stove with a single burner dual fuel stove. So this is actually the same manufacturer as we had before, Gas One, and it works very similar. We put the butane canisters in here. However, we did notice in our travels that butane canisters are a little harder to find, so if we ran out, we wanted a backup system. So this is a dual fuel, like I said before, and it comes with an adapter so you can hook in those propane bottles that like a Coleman stove uses, and those are much more popular. You usually see them at most camp stores where you normally don't see the butane. However, we do see butane like at a Cabela's or I'm trying to think where else we've seen them, but they're not quite as common. So we kind of like to have the option and backup if we can't find the butane and have to switch over to the propane canisters. Also, Keith made this little stove platform out of wood and coated it with a nice heavy coat of poly to protect the table from the heat of the stove. Now the stove doesn't get real hot underneath, but we have melted a cheap plastic tablecloth before with it, so we try, we make sure we don't put it on a tablecloth anymore. But just having a little extra protection. We kind of had a little happy accident because it was such a thick coat of poly on there, and when it dried, it kind of dripped on the underside, and so we've got all these kind of little bubbles, and they're nice thick blobs of poly, so we actually decided to leave it there. It adds just a little bit more protection and lifts it up off the table a little bit, so kind of a happy little accident there. So item 22 is we replaced our camping table. We used to have one that we've had for decades. It's a little blue one. It rolls up. You kind of screw the legs into it. So we opted to go with, this is bigger than the other one. It's, I guess that's 4 feet long. It's folding, and the legs are adjustable, so you can do different heights. So we haven't really used it yet, but we think it's a little sturdier and more stable than the one we had before. So we'll let you know how things work out there. Item 23 is we purchased this foldable stool. And the main purpose for this was actually so we could reach our awning. There's legs in here that, I'm 6 foot tall and we're on pretty level ground, and I can just barely reach these to pull these out. A step stool makes it a little easier to see what I'm doing, and also if we're on ground that slopes away from the van, there's times where we struggle to even reach this. And then so this stool can also be used as an extra little seat that you need to do something outside with. So hopefully it'll come in handy. Item 24 is we fixed these little latches on our awning. During season 3, both of them had broken off to little stubs, and we had to use pliers to be able to lock it. These little latches are to lock these legs in place and unlock them so you can telescope them in and out to get the right length. So we actually contacted Carefree Awning and bought replacement parts for those and installed those. Item 25 is we bought a couple of walkie-talkies. We don't know if we'll use them or not, but they might come in handy. We might carry them with us when we're hiking in some remote areas, just in case we get split up. We can still communicate with each other without cell service, or something simple as we're trying to back up the van into a tight place and we need to communicate with each other without yelling back and forth from one end of the outside to inside or whatever. So we'll see if we use these or not, but we'll have them just in case. Item 26 is we upgraded our photography equipment. I upgraded my phone from, I think I had an iPhone 10 before. This is an iPhone 13, so I can get that nice wide angle, and this works well in low light. Although Keith has a iPhone 11 Pro as well, so now we have 2 nice cameras on our phones to use. Now, I really like the PowerShot for its super telephoto capability, which is the camera I'm shooting with now. And I didn't want to be caught up in Alaska with all that wildlife and something happened to my PowerShot, because I can really zoom in and get some nice wildlife pictures with it. So I actually bought a spare one, so I'm traveling with a spare PowerShot just in case. In addition, we changed our GoPros out. We are just now carrying the GoPro Hero 10, and we got a little shorty stick for it to use. So we're hoping this has much better stabilization than our older GoPros that we were using, so hopefully this will work out pretty well. Plus it's waterproof. But speaking of waterproof, if I'm carrying this like in a kayak or on a boat or something and I drop it overboard, it's going to sink. So I actually bought, because there's a couple times we plan on being out on the water on boats and I don't want to lose my equipment. So this is what's called a floating handle. It also has a wrist strap, so it'll be a little more secure onto my wrist. So I'll be less likely to drop it, and if I do, this will cause everything to float, and we can retrieve it, hopefully. Along those same lines, we have protection for our iPhones. These are little pouches that you put your iPhone in. There's like a little air bubble in there, so these are waterproof. So we don't have to worry about water getting splashed up on our phones. You can still use the phone and use the cameras while it's in the pouch. So that's another water protection for us for our phones anyway. So item 26 is we made a campsite sign. Let me get it out here. Keith made a nice little I don't know what you call that, little shelf or whatever for that campsite to hang underneath the bed platform for us. But one of the issues with traveling in a motorized RV and you don't have a second vehicle with you is a lot of times you want to leave the campsite during the day and it looks like your campsite is unoccupied. Now, normally this isn't an issue if you have a campground that you have reservations and you're there for several days. And there's usually something posted on the site that it's reserved or whatever. This is more of an issue if you're boondocking, or we've actually been in a national forest campground where you were required to make your campsite look like it was occupied at all times because they had no, good way of knowing whether a site was paid for or not, so you had to make it look occupied. Now, in the past, we've done things like leave a tablecloth on the picnic table, leave our camp chairs out, But unfortunately, those items sometimes I think look like we accidentally left them, and we've had both of those items stolen on us. So we wanted to come up with a better solution. There's actually some people that'll take along a small little tent that they'll set up at their campsite, just a spare little tent to make it look like it occupied while they're gone. But we actually saw someone else have this at another campground, and a lot of people have campsite signs, that just say, their name and where they're from or whatever. But we made one that has our logo on the other side and says "Will return," so it's obvious that yes, this site is occupied. So hopefully this won't get stolen because it took a lot of work to make. So what I had done is I had printed off our logo. I made a template out of plastic poster board and then traced it on here and got some stencils and traced all the lettering on here and painted it all with acrylic paint. And then we added a couple, this was just like spare pieces of plywood, and added some hinges at the top. We put bolted on a strap here across the bottom so it'll stay open on the ground, and we kind of cut this out so it has sort of, I don't know if you can see that or not, kind of two little stubby legs on each side, and we're hoping that'll help it be a little more stable on uneven ground than just a flat bottom on there. So we'll let you know how that goes, and hopefully no one will steal this. Item 28. So in addition to making that campsite sign, we also made this little sign that just has our logo on it, and we made it in a similar fashion to the campsite sign, and then with a Sharpie we added our names and the year. Well, I guess the year's down here. And this is for the signpost forest. So if you're familiar with the Alaskan Highway, in Watson Lake there is what's called the signpost forest, and I've seen varying numbers of how many signs are in there, but it's in the tens of thousands, like 80,000, 90,000, whatever, and people are adding to it all the time. So we made our little sign so we can post it in the sign forest sign. So if you happen to come later after we've visited there and see our sign, please let us know. That would really be a lot of fun if we knew people that would see our sign in the signpost forest. Item 29 is insect repellent. Everybody's heard stories about up north, especially Alaska, that the bugs and especially mosquitoes can be bad. So we want to be prepared, which is why we repaired all our screens. So we're trying out some new products this season. We bought a thermocell, and these are the refills for it, so it just kind of protects an area that you're sitting in. Then we also got this, picaridin, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, but this is a treatment for your clothing. You spray it on your clothing and it's good for so many washes. So we might try that out. And then if it's really buggy, you hate things swarming around your face, so we got a little bug net. This is a Sea to Summit bug net that we can carry with us when we're hiking or just have around the campsite. And then last but not least, we brought along our clamshell. Now, we actually bought that in the middle of last season when we were at a campsite where the mosquitoes were too bad to sit outside. So we didn't get to use it then. We used it we just used it once last season. But we think we'll get more use out of it this season. So it's a really nice enclosure that you can sit outside in. It goes up easy, takes down easy. So we're hopefully that'll be a big plus this season. Oh, and I almost forgot this one here. And just in case all else fails, this is 100% DEET. I don't like to put all that chemicals on my body, but if it's really miserable, then we may be thankful we have that with us. Item 30 is we brought along our winter boots. These are insulated and waterproof. And yes, we're going to be up there in the summer. However, we have at least one glacier hike planned, and there's nothing worse than your toes getting cold. We also have some chemical foot warmers and toe warmers in our backpacks just in case. I've had issues a couple of times in the past where I've come close to frostbite. So I'm probably more susceptible to it now. I mean, there was a time where, my toes turned white, and then when they warmed up, they swelled up, and they weren't right for about a week. So I'd rather keep my toes. So even though it's summer, we're going to make sure that our feet do not get cold. I mean, these are also good if it's really sloppy outside, muddy, wet, whatever, to help protect our feet. Item 31 is we got new day packs to go hiking. In the past season, we either had these little tiny packs, which were great for going around town, but they're really a pain in the butt to go hiking with. They're really not quite big enough to go hiking, and your water bottles go down inside, which means every time you want to stop and get a drink, you have to pull your pack off and pull it out of the pack. So not ideal. And then the other pack we had were our large 45-liter backpacks that we would do overnight backpacking with, the same ones we took on our rim-to-rim Grand Canyon backpacking trip. And those are just a little too large to go on just a day hike. So we both got some 24-liter packs. So our water bottles go on the outside, and it seems to be kind of the perfect size to go on a day hike. So we're hoping that'll work out a lot better. Item 32 is that we replaced all the towels that we use in the van. Now, they were just kind of a mixed collection of different things. Some of them were falling apart. So we actually came across another forum where people were talking about these Norwex towels. So they're a little pricey. They're a type of microfiber, but they're supposed to absorb well, and they're somewhat soft for a microfiber. I mean, not as soft as a cotton towel. But we, at home, we actually bought a kitchen towel and a dishcloth. And we tried them out at home first, and we really loved them. They're very absorbent, and yes, they are pretty soft. So not only did we buy all these towels for our van, we actually bought some kitchen towels for our home as well. So that's the kitchen. We got a hand towel as well, and I don't know if you remember, we kind of like to hang our hand towel up on the T-Trek there with a carabiner, and the hand towel comes with this nice little loop that you can hang it with, and the same thing with the large bath towel, and this is a pretty large bath towel, but it has a little loop hook, just like the hand towel there. And then the face cloth. Now it doesn't have a little loop, and we like to hang them up, but there is this nice little tag in the corner, so we're still able to hang them up with our toiletry kits on a carabiner. So that worked out pretty well. So item 33 is a jump starter. This is another one of those items that helps us be self-reliant. So this is by NOCO, and it's not very big, as you can see. This will supposedly hold a charge pretty close to a year after the initial charge, but they recommend recharging about every 4 to 6 months, so we'll probably recharge this at least once while we're on our trip for the season. But again, this is if our battery dies, we can't get the van started. This might help us get out of a jam and get the van started and get where we need to go. Item 34 is we brought along a little emergency radio. This is an AM/FM weather band. It runs off of batteries. It has a lithium rechargeable battery, plus it can run off of AAA's. Has a little flashlight, but it can be recharged with the little solar panel, or, now let's see if I can get it going here, or a little hand crank. So just another one of those just in case little devices. Now, item 35 is we replaced the hanging shoe organizer with this trunk organizer. We used to have this shoe organizer hanging down, and it covered up the tool bag that we had here, which made it kind of difficult to get stuff in and out of there. And the sort of things we put in there were things we wanted easy access to. So we didn't want to put them inside of a tote because that's too hard to get in and out. So these are things like our flip-flops, our shower flip-flops, our sandals, our surf shoes, our nice warm slippers, and then our stuff for emergency toilet, like toilet paper, poo powder, wipes. This is where that third DC fan lives. We also managed to get more in here than what we had in the shoe organizer. So we've got our dual fuel stove in here with the platform. I've got my file that I organize all my papers in. We actually had a place to put the milepost, that Bible travel guide for Alaska. And finally, the last item, item 36, is we left our inflatable kayak and our bicycles at home for this trip. Now, the kayak, even though it's inflatable, it takes up quite a bit of space underneath the bed there. It's in a large tote with all the gear that goes with it. Takes up the whole width of the gear slide under there, and just a good amount of space. And it was space that we felt was better utilized to take more kind of emergency gear, like extra blankets and warm clothing layers. So in case our Espar heater fails on us for some reason, we'll still be fine overnight in our van. The bicycles we carried on a swing array rack in the back of the van, and that extends the length of our van about 2 to 3 feet. And so we wanted to be a little more versatile if we want to fit in some smaller parking spots. With the bikes on there, it's really kind of hard to fit into a normal parking spot, but without them, we can get by with that. And also, all the ferries we're going to be taking, they charge by the length. So the ferry rides should be a little cheaper because we don't have that extra length off the back. And that doesn't mean we aren't going to kayak or ride bikes on this trip. It's just when we want to, we'll have to rent them. So look for that. So maybe we can try out some different equipment that way. Well, thanks for watching. We hope at least one of those items was useful for you or gave you some ideas of your own travels. So if you want more details about some of those items, look in the description below. We have a link to our related blog post, so check that out. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We'd really appreciate that. Ta-ta for now.